The UFC is back in Mexico this weekend, and I'm going to give you the keys to smash the bookies on their heads. The odds for this card looks like a boxing card, with favorites up to -600-700 over a week out from the fights. But you know your boy has got you covered. In this video, I'm going to go through the entire fight card, giving you my breakdowns, prediction, and analysis for every single fight on the card. Welcome to the UFC Mexico edition of the lucrative MMA betting show. And as I said, we're back in good old Mexico City, famous for its crazy elevation. And in the main event, we have Brandon Moreno, Mexico's own, taking on Loney Kavanagh in a crazy short notice flyweight matchup that nobody expected to see, but one that showcases two of the very best fighters in the entire division. Even though Loney is not ranked and lost to a ranked fighter his last fight out, I am very confident in saying that he is one of the best fighters in the flyweight division. That matchup is spectacular. We have a veteran of the UFC and MMA and Marlon Vera trying to keep his place in the rankings, taking on the upcoming David Martinez, fresh off a huge win in his last fight against Rob Font. We got Daniel Zellhuber on the card, looking to get right after his poor performance last time out against Bobby King Green, another veteran of the UFC and MMA game. Keeping to the lighter weight divisions, which is a theme on this card, we have Felipe Bunes taking on Edgar Cháirez. That is a classic Mexico versus Brazilian banger in the flyweight, my weight, violence weight division. Very excited to talk about all of those fights with you, plus every other fight on this Mexico fight card. So run the intro, I'll see you on the other side, and let's make that cheddar once again. Welcome to another edition of the show, boys. Happy to see you in front of my screens. Girls as well. There is a percentage of my audience that are ladies, so welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are back, and we are in famous UFC Mexico City here. Now, if you don't know, and if you're not aware of what goes down in Mexico, I'm about to tell you. So a very big talking point that you're going to hear on all breakdown shows this weekend, and that you're going to hear from the fighters themselves and the management and the training teams, is that Mexico City is at huge elevation. You know, it's somewhat famous for how high it is. Now, what that means for us as sports bettors and as fight fans is that when you're at a higher level, the oxygen levels in your blood are lower, meaning in good old plain English, some of these fighters get a lot more tired. They get a lot more gassed out earlier when they're fighting this high up in elevation. So, you know, first things first, as soon as this show starts, I'm going to tell you to just be a little bit wary this weekend. Be a little bit careful. We have seen time and time again when the UFC goes to Mexico City, some people put on poor performances and performances that are abnormal, you know, anomaly performances. It doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes it seems pretty random, but we have seen it in Mexico City a lot more often than almost anywhere else on the globe. If you've got fighters that you're a little bit worried about their cardio, be a little bit more worried because we're at elevation. If a fighter usually weaponizes their cardio, maybe they're not going to be able to do it to as much of an extent this weekend. So just keep that in mind, boys. I want to tell you guys that before we even go in to start the show, because it is an important thing and I will be mentioning it throughout the show. But let's also not get hung up on that and use that as our only reason to bet a fighter or bet against a fighter. We use it in our capping. It affects the way we see the fight, but it doesn't dictate our entire prediction or analysis. See, this gambling game, you have to use all the tools at your disposal. You know, we know we're in Mexico City, the cardio is affected, we're going to use that tool. You know, we also watch tape study as a tool. We also see if fighters are overweight, underweight, injuries, all of this stuff. You know, we use everything as a tool, and then we make our final prediction. And then after that, we make our final bet, or we pass overall. So before we get into the card, go through every single fight on the card, as always, we start with the main event. I just want to ask you guys to let me know in the comments whether you would like me to start with the main event, as I usually do, or whether you would like me to switch up and start with the first fight of the night and then build up to the main event. Like, what do you prefer better? Should we tackle the main event and the main card and go that way, or should we go the other way? And while you're letting me know in the comments, please click subscribe. I check my analytics, and over 50% of the people who watch my videos do not subscribe. So a big percentage of people. You may think you're subscribed, but actually not be. If you could click subscribe, very much appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get in to the last fight of the night, the main event, the first fight of the night that I'm breaking down, which is Brandon Moreno taking on Loney Kavanagh. So Brandon Moreno, absolute veteran of the flyweight division of the UFC and of the sport, was once cut from the UFC, found his way back to UFC Gold. This guy has a great story. His record is 23 wins, 9 losses, with 2 draws stuck in there somewhere. Lona Kavanagh, on the other hand, fresh of his only loss of his entire professional career. His record is 9-1. We have Brandon Moreno sitting as a massive -250 favorite with the underdog price tag on Lona Kavanagh sitting at +210 odds. What a great flyweight matchup we have here, boys. Any flyweight matchup is great in my eyes. I just love the flyweight division. Flyweight is my weight, as I always say. These guys practice mixed martial arts at the very highest level. You know, the flexibility they have means they can showcase martial art high kicks, flexibility in scrambles, back takes, triangle chokes, these type of things at the highest level of martial arts. The speed they have is way faster than any other division. The cardio is way better than any other division. It's a treat to watch the flyweights. I just love the flyweight division, man. And this is 2 of the best flyweights in the world. And I know a lot of people will be like, James, Lona Kavanagh hasn't done anything in MMA yet. He got knocked out by Charles Johnson, who just got knocked out by Pérez. Charles Johnson is barely in the rankings. In fact, when he fought Lona Kavanagh, he was ranked number 14, actually. Number 15. So the lowest ranking you can get if you are ranked. And he knocked Lona Kavanagh out. So why are you, James, saying that Lona Kavanagh is one of the best flyweights in the division? Boys, I have to call it like I see it. That's what I believe. I believe skill set wise, he's one of the best fighters in the division. Now, there's 2 things that give me pause on Lona Kavanagh, and what that is his chin. You know, I've seen him dropped many times on the regional scene. I've now seen him knocked out for the first time ever, and it was in the UFC against a fighter who has some power in his hands, but isn't the biggest power puncher at flyweight. And then on the other hand, the other thing that gives me a bit of pause is how gassed out he got in his last fight, you know, and how the pressure wore him down in his last fight. So those are the 2 things where I say, all right, maybe Lona Kavanagh won't make it to the top. Maybe he won't make it to the top 10, to the top 5 based on these 2 issues. But if he can sort these 2 issues out, and honestly, mainly the gas issue, then I think he's going to be top 5 and maybe even champion. At the end of the day, at flyweight, you can hide a poor chin with skills. At some point, you're going to get caught. I don't think he has the worst chin of all time, and he's shown some good recoverability before in fights, outside of obviously that Charles Johnson fight. But I do think that Charles Johnson knockout was more to do with him getting very, very tired from Charles Johnson's pace and pressure, the wrestling and stuff like that we can talk about, than actual chin issue. But I definitely think that his chin is not up to par. Like, if you're talking about the top 5 in the division, Kavanagh probably has one of the worst chins there. Obviously, he's not top 5, but I'm saying if he makes it there. I do think you can make it to the top of the flyweight division with a dodgy chin. I actually think Joshua Van has a dodgy chin. And I mean, he was knocked out by the exact same person who knocked Kavanagh out. And Joshua Van is the champion right now, right? And actually, he's way more hittable than Lona Kavanagh. So I do think you can make it to the top of the division. It's just going to be a little bit harder. And the jury's still out there. Maybe Kavanagh's chin issues do come when he gets tired and can't push his wrestling, can't rely on his wrestling. But one thing that Brandon Moreno has in spades is a great chin and great cardio. So if you have a poor chin and poor cardio, that can be exposed by someone who has amazing cardio and an amazing chin. And that's what Brandon Moreno has. And I want to make this clear now. I'm not saying Lona has bad cardio at all. I do think he has a bit of a dodgy chin. I'm not saying he has a bad cardio. And I want to address this right now. It's sometimes hard to get my point across in a video because I'm trying to be succinct and I'm trying to not make the video go on for 5, 6, 7 hours, right? So sometimes I gloss over certain things. Otherwise, you would literally be watching me speak for 7 hours. I know you guys would love that, but I can't always do that. No, I'm only joking. That would be way too long, you know? So I want to be very clear in what I mean, which is Lona Kavanagh in the UFC has used his wrestling to offset pressure to win in fights, right? He wasn't able to do that against Charles Johnson because the wrestling that he used to offset Charles Johnson didn't really work on him. Yes, he took Charles Johnson down. Charles Johnson scrambled and got back up. Charles Johnson tried to take him down. Lona reversed it. Very high level, very skillful fighter, as I've said. But he wasn't able to control Charles Johnson when he did reverse him. And he had the opportunity to. You know, one specific sequence, he got Charles Johnson in a guillotine. This happened twice. He reversed him on the second one and he was in top control for a second, but Charles Johnson just scrambled out. You know, Lona Kavanagh wasn't able to keep him on the mat. He was able to keep his previous opponents on the mat at times, being Jose Ochoa and Felipe dos Santos, right? So to offset the pressure of Dos Santos and Ochoa, who have a heavy pressure game, he used his wrestling and grappling. When he tried to do it against Charles Johnson, he wasn't able to do it. Then he seemed to get very, very badly gas out. You know, the tide started shifting dramatically, honestly. So when I'm saying that Lona Kavanagh may not have the best cardio, what I mean is in a high-paced fight where a fighter has a heavy pressure style and, this is the big and, he cannot use his wrestling to offset that pressure, the tide may start turning for Lona, the wheels may start falling off, and he may start getting tired, having an adrenaline dump, whether it's mental or physical. That may be the case. I can't say it's definitely the case because it only happened in one fight against Charles Johnson, but that is why he lost that fight. You know, he lost that fight because he couldn't handle the pressure of Charles Johnson. A lot of people say it's purely because of the wrestling, and if he didn't wrestle, he wouldn't have gassed out. I'm not 100% sure of that. I don't think we have evidence to say that's completely true. You know, on rewatch, the first round was a masterclass in MMA. Lona Kavanagh looked like a champion. He looked like the flyweight champion in round 1. But this isn't a one-round sport. You know, in round 2, before the wrestling, mind you, Lona started to tire. He started to gas out a little bit, you know. Charles Johnson started to land some body kicks and some leg kicks that were completely missing in round 1. You know, and this was before the wrestling. Charles Johnson actually decided to wrestle Lona Kavanagh first. I completely forgot that, but on rewatch, that was what was shown to me. Charles Johnson shot in for a couple of takedowns. Lona Kavanagh reversed him 2 times and then started wrestling himself. But the initial wrestling attempts wasn't even Lona, because why would you? He was having a lot of success on the feet. But Charles Johnson just started to give him something to think about, started to pressure him. He was throwing body kicks, low kicks. These were landing more often. And then he started to wrestle himself, started to re-wrestle, started to get reversed, but continued to wrestle. At this point, Charles Johnson's team starts screaming to the heavens. They start screaming for him to pressure. He's going to get tired, Charles. He's going to get tired, Charles. And obviously, he did get tired. The question's out for me, you know. The jury's out on if Lona Kavanagh can sustain a high pace if he isn't able to use his wrestling. Because I haven't seen it yet. He hasn't proved it to me yet. The only times he has proved a sustained pace was when he could use his wrestling to bail him out of the war on the feet. The thing about Lona Kavanagh's style, boys, is that he is so fast, maybe the fastest flyweight in the entire division, and he uses a lot of movement, footwork, counter-striking, and eyes in the pocket. And what you need for that game is elite cardio, you know, because if not, you start getting tired, you start getting hit more, you're not used to getting hit because your style isn't give one and take one like Marlon Vera, you know, so you're not used to getting hit and then you get knocked out, you know. So I think Lona Kavanagh is one of the best fighters in the entire world, honestly. But those 2 issues that he made, one issue that he does have, a chin. He definitely does have a chin issue. I'm not saying it's the worst chin of all time, but he has an issue. And the second issue that he may have could literally just cost him his dreams of becoming a world champion and even being ranked in the top 5. Now, the reason I'm not 100% sold that he does have that cardio issue is because it only really showed itself in one fight. You know, it only showed itself in the Charles Johnson fight. So I don't want to just label him as someone who's going to gas out if he can't wrestle. I don't want to label him as that yet. He's a young fighter. He's improving heavily from fight to fight. He's getting better. He's at a solid camp, training with Nathaniel Wood, who's a veteran in the game at this point. Brad One Punch Pickett, a veteran of MMA, a very solid camp. I have a lot of respect for all of those guys. And I know he's going to be improving fight to fight. And cardio is something that you can improve. The best fighters in a division, they do improve their cardio. We do see that. Whether it's with being more reserved, whether it's using a specific energy tank that you're good at. For example, maybe you're not very good at wrestling, you get tired, but you can really tie someone up in the clinch. Maybe you can strike for 25, 30 minutes, but if you wrestle, you can only do it for 5. So I do think he can right that wrong if he has this wrong. And the one last thing I'll say on this, right? And I'm going very in-depth on this because I think this is the very thing that we need to go in-depth on to make a prediction on this fight. You know, there's many things that we already know, but I think this is the most important point. And so the last thing I want to say on this, boys, is that I'm not ready to write Lona Kavanagh off as a complete gasser just yet. And the reason is because I had the feeling watching that Charles Johnson fight that he wasn't death-gassed. He wasn't completely done. He was just really feeling the pace and pressure. He was really feeling the moment. He had been hit with some big shots before that people may forget. And so he was tired out, yes, but I think it was more of a mental issue. I mean, Charles Johnson's coach was screaming, he's going to get tired, he's going to get tired. Lona Kavanagh is a young lad who has a lot of experience, but not that much in the UFC. And it's the first time he wasn't able to offset pressure with his wrestling. And I just had the feeling that it was more of a mental fatigue, being punched in the face fatigue, and a fatigue that may have blown over. So what my whole point here is that if the fight did get to round 3, and we was 27 seconds away from it getting to round 3, I'm not ruling out the possibility that Lona Kavanagh may have had a second wind. We see this time and time again with fighters in the UFC, boys. Let's not get mistaken here. Fighters, Andre Petroski is one that comes to mind. Andre Petroski seems to be tired in round 2 of every single fight he's ever fought, even on the regional scene. And guess what happens? In round 3, sometimes he has his best round. He has his best round of the fight in round 3 after looking almost death-gassed in round 2. It's happened multiple times. In the Wellington-Turman fight, he looked very tired in round 3. He damn near got a finish there. You know, if he can push through that initial fatigue that he usually gets specifically in round 2, then he can usually push on. We see it in Dricus du Plessis' 5-round fights as well. You know, and even 3-round fights, honestly. Let's talk about Dricus. In round 2 of the Darren Till fight, the guy looks extremely tired. He is done. He's losing the fight. Darren Till via KO is inevitable. And then in round 3, he comes back and has great cardio and ends up getting a finish. You know, even in his 5-round fights, he seems to gas out a little bit in the middle stages, and then he pushes on a little bit. We saw that in the Sean Strickland fight. So, and honestly, even in the Izzy fight, he was looking tired in the middle round. So I feel like there's fighters out there who do get tired, but then they push on. I'm not ruling out the possibility that Lona Kavanagh may have that inside of him, and he may have actually even had that in that Charles Johnson fight if the fight was allowed to go to round 3. Now, the reason I went super in-depth on that and said it's very important to this matchup, it's actually multitude of reasons, and I'll tell you the reasons now. So, reason 1 is what I told you at the start. This fight is at elevation. Mexico City is at elevation. And as I said, when you fight in elevation, your blood oxygen levels are lower. It means we see fighters gas out way easier time and time again. So if Lona has bad cardio or poor cardio or not up to scratch cardio, we're going to see it pronounced at UFC Mexico. Reason number 2 is because this is a 5-round fight and the first of Lona's UFC career. I'll have to go back and see if I don't think he's ever been 5 rounds amateur. I think he was set for Cage Warriors. I think he was set for a 5-round fight, but I don't think he's ever gone 5 rounds. I will check that. But this is his first 5-round fight in the UFC. So if my man was gassing out in 3-round fights against Charles Johnson, what's he going to look like over 5 rounds? Number 3 is because he's taking on one of the most cardio-esque fighters in flyweight history in Brandon Moreno. You are going to struggle to find a flyweight fighter who has better cardio historically than Brandon Moreno. It's almost never happened before. He may be number 1. So that is a tough fighter to go up against if your cardio is not up to scratch. Number 4, Brandon Moreno, his opponent, has the exact same skill set within him, whether he uses it or not. He has the exact same skill set, or he has the exact same tools that he can use that have troubled Lona Kavanagh in the past, which is the Jose Ochoa pressure, the Felipe dos Santos pressure, and the Charles Johnson pressure. Of course, he won those first 2 fights, but they were sweaty at times. The Dos Santos one, he was just able to grapple easily, but Ochoa took his back. Ochoa hurt him. Dos Santos hit him with a spinning back elbow. I mean, Brandon Moreno has that ability to push forward, push a crazy pace, be aggressive, and Lona has struggled with that in the past. Let's go on to Brandon Moreno now. Brandon Moreno, ultra veteran of the sport, very, very high level fighter, but somebody who is also coming off a TKO loss, just like Lona Kavanagh. I mean, you can call that one a KO, but they're both coming out a knockout loss in their last fight. Now, Brandon Moreno's loss was a very strange one to me. Lona Kavanagh's loss, that was like, it was almost predictable watching the fight back. The fight against Cháirez, I mean, that was a strange sequence the way he got finished. You know, he got taken down. Cháirez found himself in back mount, and Brandon Moreno just, his scrambling ability was not what it usually once was, you know, or it wasn't what we have seen before. I mean, nobody has controlled him like that and been able to put damage on him like that. Not even Alejandro Pantoja, you know, fighting him so many times, wasn't able to really dominate him from back position outside of that tough fight like that, you know? But, you know, when these fighters start getting older, especially at flyweight, we start to see a drop-off that is often extremely fast, extremely brutal, and extremely unforgiving. You know, in his very last fight, Brandon Moreno gets taken down, controlled like he never has done before, really. Even Pantoja was able to, get the back, but not control him like Tyra and land those ground and pound shots. You know, maybe Brandon Moreno getting older, he doesn't have the athleticism he used to. Maybe the fast twitch muscle fibers are slightly lacking, and that allowed Tyra to, build his base, break his base, pummel him, and just keep him down for that 5 to 10 seconds longer needed to get the stoppage. Now, I do think the stoppage was a very, very bad stoppage, to be honest. I think it was a terrible one. But at the end of the day, you're in that position. You give the referee a chance to stop the fight anytime you do get punched from back control, because it is a dominant position, So I don't know whether that was because Brandon Moreno completely gassed himself out holding onto the triangle. I mean, if you go back and you see Brandon Moreno in between rounds, after round 1 in that Tyra fight, he looks done. He looks like he's got zero gas left. I've never seen it in the history of Brandon Moreno fights. And let me tell you now, I watched these fights for a living. I know Brandon Moreno very, very well. I've never seen anything like that. He was completely gassed out after round 1. His head is down. He's taking massive breaths. This is a guy who pushes the pace on everybody. The guy who was pushing the pace easily in round 5 against Pantoja, who had more gas than him. So it was kind of crazy to see. But is that an age thing? It's just tough. Was it just a bad performance? Was it because he gassed himself out holding onto the triangle choke? It's hard to know. But when these fighters get older, we do start to see a big drop-off. And honestly, it leads me on to say something else, which is Brandon Moreno is very inconsistent. His performances are inconsistent. He does do weird things from time to time. Sometimes he looks like the best flyweight in the world, and other times he doesn't push the pace, he doesn't throw shots. Look at that Brandon Royval fight. That was at Mexico as well. That was a card where the Mexico altitude seemed to affect a lot of fighters. I remember famously Felipe dos Santos completely gassed out on that card almost as soon as the fight happened. And he's known for his pace and pressure. Did fight Lona Kavanagh once upon a time as well. So that was a strange card. But Brandon Moreno is no stranger to strange performances, really, honestly. He's changed his style a lot. At times, Brandon Moreno will push forward and use his durability advantage and throw so much volume. And sometimes he would just stand on the outside and not really want to engage too much, like that Brandon Royval fight. Honestly, even like that Tyra fight. He was standing on the outside, not really exchanging too much. And if he does that, he's not going to put the pace and pressure needed on Lona Kavanagh needed to break him, So that is the issue here, Is Brandon Moreno going to use the tools in his toolbox needed to expose Lona Kavanagh? Is he going to use his durability again? Is he going to walk forward into range and push a crazy pace? Or is he going to stay on the outside, try and technically strike with him like he has done against a lot of fighters and been successful against a lot of fighters? But I don't think he'll be successful against Lona Kavanagh. Lona Kavanagh is a much better technical striker than Brandon Moreno. He has better footwork to stay on the outside and play that game. Not better footwork in general, maybe better footwork in general, probably better footwork in general, but that's a different conversation. Better footwork to play the outside point striking game is what I mean, to play the technicality game. He's a better counter striker, much better, in my opinion, Lona Kavanagh. He's faster of the two. He's more nimble, he's more agile. He can become a more effective striker, but Lona Kavanagh is a much, much better striker, skill set for skill set. But as I always say, it's not all about the skills, it's about who's more effective with their tools. You could be way less skillful, but have a much better chin and way more power than someone and win the fight. You know what I mean? Just based on your chin and your power. Like Francis Ngannou was way less skillful than almost everybody he knocked out, but he knocked them out because he had crazy power. He only needed to touch you once, so he put himself in danger to touch you once to knock you out. So while he was pretty poor technically, it did not matter. So I think that Brandon Moreno can do it. I just don't know if he will do it. It's kind of hard to trust him after last fight. I don't think that was a great performance from him. It was a strange fight overall. And like I said, it's in Mexico City. What about if a Brandon Royval type fight happens again in Mexico City? It's just, there's a lot of question marks for minus 250 here. Lona Kavanagh has to kind of perform his best to win the fight, in my opinion, or Moreno has to just give it away. But I think those two are fairly possible. It's hard to trust Lona Kavanagh after what happened in his last fight. You know, gassing out after 6-7 minutes against Charles Johnson, and now you have to fight the former champion for 25 minutes at altitude. It's kind of crazy. But one thing I noticed that is, again, strange for Brandon Moreno is that he only went to Mexico about 2 weeks ago. He usually goes to Mexico about a month or two before the fight, maybe to get acclimatized. He understands Mexico elevation, but he only went 2 weeks ago. So I don't know why he's doing that. And if he comes in here and his conditioning is not up to scratch, he's going to literally be leaving on the table one of Lona Kavanagh's biggest potential weaknesses. Leaving on the table the chance to exploit it, I should say. Another very important talking point here is that Lona Kavanagh has taken this fight on short notice. So if you didn't know, Brandon Moreno was training for Asu Almabayev, who ultimately pulled out for the fight. Now, Asu Almabayev is a grappler, so Brandon was training for basically a pure grappler. Now he's training for basically a pure striker. So that's very negative on the Brandon side. He had to switch up his camp, but at least he was still training for a fight. Lona Kavanagh wasn't training for this fight. By the time they fight, Lona would have only been in camp for 6 weeks. That's not that long to go from not training for a fight at all. Sorry, he was training for a fight, Lona Kavanagh. Let me get that clear. I made a mistake there. He was training for a fight. Lona was supposed to be fighting Bruno Silva, which is kind of a layup for him at this stage of his career, honestly. Nowhere near the level of Brandon Moreno. And he was meant to be fighting on March the 14th, which is 2 weeks after he will fight. So it's like 2 weeks less time to cut weight, to train, and you're moving across the world to Mexico, which is known for elevation, when you've just shown cardio issues in your last fight and honestly, and potentially some of the other UFC fights. And you also go from fighting Bruno Silva to one of the greatest fighters in flyweight history in Brandon Moreno. So it's kind of annoying on the Kavanagh side, like the circumstances to which he got this fight. But it's a very important talking point for sports betting. All right, boys. So where do I ultimately end up on this fight? Who am I picking? Where do I think the value is, etc., etc.? And I'm going to talk to you about why my picks are not bets, a concept that is very easy to understand in sports betting, but a lot of people still don't understand it. So this is an easy way to understand it, boys. If Lona Kavanagh was lined as a plus 1 million underdog against Brandon Moreno, who was lined as a minus 2 million favorite, everybody would be betting on Lona Kavanagh. If you put $1 down and you got $1 million profit if Lona won, everyone on the planet would be betting on Lona Kavanagh, even, here's the important part, if they picked Brandon Moreno to win the fight. Right? So you have all these people picking Brandon Moreno to win the fight. All of those people are betting on Lona Kavanagh because all they need to do is put $1 down to get $1 million profit, right? So that is an exaggerated example to demonstrate to you why picks are not bets and the difference between picks and bets, and that the difference comes from the betting odds and where we see value in the odds. That's like a beginner-proof concept that almost everybody will be able to understand. Now, obviously, Lona isn't a plus 1 million underdog, but he is a plus 210 underdog. So then you have to use your brain and say, okay, do I think there's value on that? Yes, I think there's value on plus 1 million. I think there's value on plus 1,000. Do I think there's value on plus 300 though? You know, like, is there value there? That's obviously a lot harder to decipher, but it's the exact same conversation and it demonstrates why picks are never bets unless there's value there. So ultimately for my pick / prediction / where I see the value, I do think that Brandon Moreno should be favored in this fight. You know, I can't say that Lona Kavanagh should be a favorite, but I don't necessarily agree with Brandon Moreno being such a big favorite. You know, I think if Lona Kavanagh didn't get knocked out in his last fight and made it to round 3, I kind of feel like he would have got a second win. Let's say he got a second win in round 3. He would be plus 120 here, you know? He would be undefeated still and plus 120, plus 115, you know, maybe plus 110. It might even go to pick him on fight day. Instead, we're getting plus 210. Now, that did happen. Charles Johnson did knock him out. You know, if my grandma had wheels, she'd be a bicycle. I understand that. But we can't just look at one iteration of a fight and draw so many conclusions to it. So yes, Charles Johnson knocked him out. But if they fight tomorrow, Lona may style on him and win a decision easily. You know, Lona may put it on him. Lona hurt him in round 1 badly. He was touching his eye a lot. Maybe Lona would get a knockout. Lona's very dangerous. You know, so I'm not just going to look at that fight and just say, oh yeah, that's going to happen in every time, you know, they fight, or that's going to happen anytime anyone can push a pace on him. I'm not sure about that, right? So I like to think of the betting game a lot more abstractly than that. And I could definitely see a scenario where Brandon Moreno, who has all the tools to win, does not use his tools. He doesn't push a crazy pace. He doesn't get in Lona's face and test his chin. He doesn't go for a durability war with him. And he doesn't put so much pace and pressure on to make Lona grapple and then use his superior scrambling ability to get on top and wear Lona out. I could easily see Brandon Moreno going in there and doing what he seems to always want to do now, which is strike on the outside, lean over, he's got that high guard, throw those sneaky head kicks, and just technically kickbox. You know, he kind of likes doing that now. So I could definitely see him do that. If he does that, I can't say he's minus 250 odds there. I might even say it's close to a pick'em because I'm still going to envision some cardio issues taking place even in that type of fight. I still feel like Brandon Moreno has a cardio advantage, and maybe after 3 or 4 rounds he's going to be like, you know what, this guy's getting tired now. I can see it now. I couldn't see it in the first few rounds. So let me push a pace. Like the tiredness might make him push a pace. Like that's most likely he would probably do well in round 5 if they do go all 5 rounds, right? No matter what game plan he employs, because he'd probably realize in round 5 that he could push a pace on him. So what I'm trying to say, boys, is Lona Kavanagh is probably the most likely to win round 1 because he's one of the best 1-round fighters in UFC today. And then he only needs to win 2 more out of the next 4. You know, it's 50-50. 2 out of 4 and not get finished. It's a big if because Brandon Moreno has all the tools to finish him in round 2 or 3, in my opinion. But I could see him not doing it. For that reason, I'm going to say that Lona Kavanagh is the value side here. I'm going to say Lona Kavanagh is the winner of this fight. And I'm going to say that Brandon Moreno fumbles the bag and Lona emerges as a star after losing to Charles Johnson, just the same as what happened to Joshua Van. I got Lona Kavanagh for the win. In the co-main event of the evening, we have another veteran of the UFC and of MMA in general, Marlon Vera, and he is taking on another newcomer with only 1 defeat in David Martinez. Marlon Vera has a record of 23 wins, 11 losses, and 1 draw. David Martinez, on the other hand, 13 wins and 1 loss. So very similar matchup to the main event when you're talking about a veteran fighting a newcomer, and the records are extremely similar as well. But the odds are flipped on this one. So the newcomer is a big favorite this time out. David Martinez coming into this fight as the minus 260 favorite, with the underdog price tag on Marlon Vera sitting at plus 220 odds. Another solid lighter weight fighter contest here. Most of the card, honestly, is like bantamweights, featherweights, lightweights, flyweights. We don't have too many big boys here. They know not to put the big boys on at elevation because, as I said, it really affects the cardio systems. So the UFC know what they're doing here. 2 guys who you don't have to worry about their cardio, Marlon Vera and David Martinez. Probably 2 of the best cardios in the entire bantamweight division. I mean, these guys can go all day. Definitely Marlon Vera. David Martinez, the jury may still be out. He hasn't really been tested that much, but he's got good cardio himself, in my opinion. I love David Martinez. I've bet on him multiple times throughout his UFC run. I think he's a very, very good fighter. I actually bet against him on the Contender Series, and I learned my lesson there. I faded him. I bet on a plus 150 underdog, and you know, Martinez looked big favorite there. So I learned my lesson after that fight, and I said, you know what, this guy's going to go far, and I bet on him in every single UFC fight. He hasn't had a lot, but I bet on him in his last fight against Rob Font as an underdog. He looked very good there. Dropped Rob Font in the last seconds of the 3rd round, hurt him badly. Who knows what would have happened there? He may have got a KO, which would have been a crazy one. KO Rob Font in round 3 if that fight had been allowed to continue longer, but you know, Rob Font, amazing recoverability, so maybe not. It was a good performance from David Martinez, man. A massive step up in competition. Most people thought he would lose. He was the underdog, and he came out with the bag. Now he's a big favorite against Marlon Vera, who beat Rob Font, who's on a similar level to Rob Font. You know, although it may be an easier stylistic matchup, in my opinion, for David Martinez, it doesn't mean he's definitely going to win. You know, some fighters perform on some days, they don't perform on others. Shit happens in MMA, and everything is about implied probability, is about percentages, and is about the betting odds, because I am not a predictor. I am an MMA sports bettor. You know, I make my living from betting on MMA. I don't make my living from making YouTube videos. It's a very big difference. So I always look at the lines, and I don't love David Martinez at minus 260 just because, as a gambler, boys, when you bet on someone as an underdog in their last fight, and now they're minus 260 favorite, a massive favorite against someone basically on the same level, it's just tough to get behind them. Ultimately, I think David Martinez wins this fight. I do think he's the better fighter overall in terms of, like, he's got the better skill set. Stylistically, it's a tough fight for Stylistically, it's a tough fight for Marlon Vera. David Martinez has very good footwork, very good kicking game, very good volume, and is able to bounce around on the back foot and counter you. Marlon Vera does have trouble closing his opponent. He walks forward into range. He has trouble at times setting himself to finally throw strikes. You know, if you can bounce around on the outside and do a Sean O'Malley game plan, you can kind of make Marlon Vera look bad. And David Martinez, to some degree, can do that. Now, the issue comes with Marlon Vera's power and durability, because he has a durability and potential danger/power advantage over almost anybody in the division, you know, including Sean O'Malley. And we saw that in their fight, honestly, in round 5. Marlon Vera did hurt Sean O'Malley to the body. Obviously, I'm talking about their second fight, not the first fight. He hurt Sean O'Malley to the body there, and Sean O'Malley couldn't hurt Marlon Vera the entire 5-round fight, even though he landed an insane knee in that fight. Marlon was never really hurt. The one punch that Marlon landed actually did win Sean O'Malley, and according to his words, hurt him pretty badly. So Marlon always has the chance to catch you with a big shot, even in a fight that he is losing. And he does have that chance here against David Martinez. But more than likely, I believe David Martinez is able to employ his usual game plan, which is stay on the outside, make his opponent chase him, be the matador to the ball, counter strike when needed, throw more volume, good kicks, etc., and win this fight. I don't think he's going to win it inside the distance. I think that if he was going to do that, it would have been against Rob Font, not Marlon Vera. Marlon Vera is almost unfinishable in the division. He's had 11 losses and all 11 via decision. The guy's never been submitted, never been KO'd. I don't think it's going to happen here. Marlon can win this fight. Like, if there's any value on any money lines, you could maybe say it's Marlon, just because, you know, he's a big underdog. Again, this is a step up in competition, maybe not from Rob Font, but from everyone he's ever fought in his entire career before then. And from Rob Font, it's probably just like a step sideways in competition, similar level. And this time, he can't win the fight on damage, because Marlon Vera doesn't really, like, he takes damage so well. You know, if anything, Marlon Vera is going to be the one landing the knockdowns and getting the judges' eyes like Martinez did at the end of round 3 in that fight, you know? So I got David Martinez to win this fight. I got him to win via decision. And I think if you play him, you should play him via decision. So that's actually a prop that I'm giving out that I think could be a good prop. Now, the odds are not out for that at the moment, so I don't know what they're going to be. But I feel like David Martinez via decision could be a bet that I make, could be a bet that I send out to my VIP subscribers, the Elite Zone, this weekend. And it's a bet that I think has, depending on the price, could have value, because I think it's high likelihood of happening. You know, I'm pretty confident David Martinez wins a decision this week. But as I said, I would be very careful putting him into parlays and stuff, just because at what point does the value disappear at minus 260, you know? So we're getting close to that point, if not already surpassed it. But my ultimate prediction will be David Martinez via decision. Moving on, and we have Daniel Zellhuber taking on King Green. I mean, two veterans of UFC at this point. I mean, it has to be said now, King Green definitely the more veteran than the other. But Daniel Zellhuber, I mean, this guy's had plenty of fights in the UFC now, took L's, took wins, and he really needs to start putting his foot on the gas if he hopes to make the run that he has spoke of in his interviews. Zellhuber coming into this fight with a record of 15 wins, only 3 losses. King Green, probably the most extensive MMA record in the entire card, 33 wins, 17 losses with 1 draw in there. Currently, Daniel Zellhuber sitting as a massive minus 500 favorite, despite losing as a minus 700 favorite in his last fight, taking on Bobby Green, who is the plus 375 underdog, who to some degree has a semi-similar style to the person who dethroned Daniel Zellhuber at minus 700 odds, Michael Johnson, last time out. So for this one, boys, I would say this is a straightforward fight. You know, if Zellhuber didn't lose as a minus 700 favorite to Michael Johnson in his last fight, I would be sitting here saying that Zellhuber was, you know, close to a lock. And while I still think he's going to win the fight, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth when he loses as a minus 700 favorite. You know, it's just so hard to trust a fighter after they do that. Now, I didn't bet on him in that fight. I didn't bet on Michael Johnson. No, I wish I did. I actually think I bet on Daniel Zellhuber to finish Michael Johnson in that fight. So I'm not going to be laying minus 700 price tags, but I think they gave us slight plus money for the finish. I think it was going to happen. I thought it was going to happen, but it wasn't to be. You know, I think in that fight, he got thrown off early. He got hurt. And Michael Johnson is still extremely fast with his hands. You know, probably the fastest hands, I want to say maybe in UFC history. I mean, Michael Johnson's hand speed is absolutely insane. And I'm actually going to say he has the fastest hands in UFC history. So sometimes, as a striker, it can be a little bit dodgy to get around that. I mean, how many people are outstriking Michael Johnson? I mean, it doesn't really happen. Yes, you can land a knockout on him. Diego Ferreira, Josh Emmett. But man, he's winning those fights until he loses them. You know, Josh Emmett, he was piecing him up. Josh Emmett went to fight on damn near for the title. You know, so it's like Michael Johnson is a bit of a beast on the feet. I just thought Zellhuber would be too much for him. Now, the issue here, or the issue there, was the speed, as I mentioned, but also Michael Johnson can knock you out and really put you down. Bobby Green has some hand speed for sure. Not as fast as Michael Johnson, though. And nowhere near as much power, and he's nowhere near as athletic. Bobby Green stands in the middle and tries to get his boxing rhythm going, almost like he's hitting pads, almost like he's having a spar. You know, he talks to you, he's throwing to the body, admires his work. Michael Johnson is not like that. Michael Johnson, very tight guard, doesn't speak to you, doesn't get involved in anything, throws really hard shots down the pipe, aims for a knockout in almost every strike he throws. Very different style to Bobby Green, although they are both primarily boxers only, you know, so even though they're boxers only for the most part, they have a completely different boxing style. And I think the boxing style of Michael Johnson is way harder to deal with for Zellhuber than Bobby Green. You know, just boxing wise, right? I'm not saying like grappling and stuff. I'm not going to speak about that because Michael Johnson will be easier to grapple than Bobby Green, right? But you get what I'm trying to say. I think Michael Johnson's style on the feet is way better than Green's to beat Daniel Zellhuber. I don't think Zellhuber's going to be worried so much about the power or the speed. You know, I don't think he will, where he was completely worried about the power and speed of Michael Johnson. So if he's not worried about the power of speed, he's going to be able to open up his arsenal in four. He's going to be able to kick to the body, kick to the head. He's going to be able to land his own 1-2s. He's going to be able to box with him in the pocket, use his durability advantage that he has a massive one on, because he ain't going to be too worried about the shots coming back at him. You know, so if Daniel Zellhuber comes in here as he usually does, you know, and he comes in here not timid, not hesitant, to which he has been in 2 fights now, Michael Johnson and Trey Ogden. Outside of those fights, and I don't want to call them anomalies because there was 2 fights now, but if he comes in here his usual self outside of those fights, like his other 5 fights or whatever he's had in the UFC, I think he goes through Bobby Green here. You know, I think he's got way better kicks. I think he could even land a head kick. I think he could like hurt Bobby Green and then jump on a front choke in a scramble. Bobby Green might even shoot a takedown or something like that after getting hurt or just being peppered on the feet a little bit too much, not really liking it. So I got Daniel Zellhuber here. I got Daniel Zellhuber to win inside the distance, just as I did against Michael Johnson. I'm going back to the well. I'm not saying I'm betting it. I'm just saying I'm predicting it, you know, like I did in his last fight. I could be wrong again. I was wrong then, but most people were because he was minus 700. So we'll see how it plays out. But I've definitely got Daniel Zellhuber to win this fight and semi-redeem himself from that semi-embarrassing loss as a big favorite last time out. Daniel Zellhuber inside the distance is my official prediction. Next up, we have Edgar Cháirez taking on Felipe Bunes. Cháirez has a record of 12 wins, 6 losses, with Felipe Bunes, on the other hand, coming into this fight with a record of 14 wins and 8 losses. Cháirez sitting as a big minus 235 favorite, with the underdog price tag on Felipe Bunes sitting at plus 200 odds. So the battle of Mexico and Brazil. I always like this battle. Mexican fighters are known to be extremely tough, extremely durable, with great cardio and just an insane will to win, not only in MMA, but honestly mainly in boxing. And then we have the Brazilian fighters who are super high level at MMA. I always feel like the best countries for MMA are by far Russia, America, and Brazil. Those are the top 3. You know, you get elite fighters from all of those. Felipe Bunes is from Brazil. I'm not going to call him an elite fighter. I don't think he's championship material or anything like that. And we have seen that in some of his fights against fighters who are championship material, like Joshua Van, where he got TKO'd in round 2. But I do think he's a good fighter. He's a very aggressive fighter. This guy will come out Muay Thai style, try and kick your face off. Even when he's getting pummeled, even when he's getting hurt, he still throw back with bad intentions. And where he really shines is his grappling. You know, he has extremely slick submissions. You know, he's always getting fighters in guillotines and throwing up triangle chokes and very active guard. He's not easy to control. We saw that in the Rafael Estevam fight. Estevam, one of the best control grapplers in the division, honestly. And, you know, Bunes clearly lost the fight, but he was still throwing up submission attempts. You know, Estevam at times did look like he might pull away stronger and start to land ground and pound, etc., etc. But Bunes stayed tough. He was trying to get him in a guillotine. He was trying to, at one point, lock him up in a buggy choke. So you have to be careful around Felipe Bunes. You know, on the feet, he's going to throw with reckless abandon. And then on the ground, he's also going to throw submissions up with reckless abandon. The issue with a lot of these fighters who are attack-oriented first is that if they don't get their finish, they can start to get tired because of all of the attacks that they're throwing. They can start to get discouraged and ultimately get finished. You know, we have seen that in Bunes' career before, but you definitely have to mind your P's and Q's around him. We got Edgar Cháirez on the other hand, bit of a different different fighter. You know, I would say that the guy isn't as aggressive at all. He isn't as intentional of a finisher, but he's very solid, very good, well-rounded fighter. I mean, Edgar Cháirez is very, very good on the ground. Good triangle choke. We've seen time and time again in wrap-up fighters, in solid guillotines. Even in fights where he hasn't got the guillotine, he has used it to reverse. Edgar Cháirez has actually had a submission attempt on every single fighter that he has fought in the UFC, which is an interesting stat because he's actually more of a striker, you know, and it's usually the fighters trying to take him down and then he snatches up a guillotine or, you know, he throws up a triangle choke off his back or something like that. But he's actually mainly a striker. Very good boxing, long range boxing, tall, long, rangy for the weight class, very, very strong leg kicks. I mean, there's not much to not like about Edgar Cháirez. I kind of feel like Edgar Cháirez is more put together. You know, his entire game is more well-rounded. He is more put together than someone like Felipe Bunes, who's a little bit reckless. I think Cháirez has got better cardio, honestly, better striking. The grappling I would probably give to Bunes, but I do think Cháirez can hang there, and Cháirez could even submit Bunes, especially as the fight gets into the later rounds where Bunes may have thrown his attacks out and, as I said, tired out a little bit. So I don't even think I would give a grappling advantage to Bunes, although I would say he's probably a bit more dangerous, probably a bit more likely to go for takedowns, etc., etc. I think Cháirez can hang there for sure. And I also think Cháirez is more durable and tougher. You know, I think they're both fairly durable, you know, to some... I mean, all right, I want to rescind what I said there. I don't think they're both fairly durable. What do I think? I think Cháirez is more durable than Bunes. That is something I want to say here for sure. You know, Joshua Van had him absolutely out. And honestly, he probably would have got finished in that fight if it wasn't for a Hail Mary spinning attack, which hurt Joshua Van badly in that second round. I'll go on record and say now that Joshua Van round 2 versus Edgar Cháirez was probably the best round 2 in 2024. But he did stay very tough in that round, was hurt multiple times throughout the round, and even in the entire fight. You know, after round 1, it was a bit of a feeling out process, but round 2 and round 3, Edgar Cháirez was hurt at points in those rounds, and he stayed tough and hurt Joshua Van himself, whereas Felipe Bunes didn't end up actually getting finished by Joshua Van in the second round. So they both got a mutual opponent there. Edgar Cháirez definitely performed a lot better than Bunes, and I think the path to victory for Bunes is most certainly the grappling. Of course, he's very aggressive on the feet. He could land a big shot, and we have seen Cháirez hurt before, but I just feel like over the 15-minute distance, Cháirez is a much better striker, man. Like, even in round 1, he might just knock him out. You know, we saw what he did to CJ Figueroa in their last fight. Very slick on the feet, very big knockdown. Like, the guy's got big power early. So he definitely could come early, but Felipe Bunes, after a couple of minutes, Cháirez will start reading him and he won't have much for him, in my opinion. So we talk about the grappling. Well, Felipe Bunes, I don't think he's the best wrestler. I don't think he's that strong. I don't think he's that physical, but he is aggressive with it, and he doesn't have to wrestle you. He can roll for an Imanol roll, or, you know, he can just pull guard. But as I said, I feel like Cháirez will be able to hang there. You know, I think Cháirez is a good enough jiu-jitsu player to not get submitted, but I do think that the best path to victory for Bunes would be a submission, or at least a grappling. We see Cháirez has 33% takedown defense, and I think a lot of people are going to see that and say, oh, maybe Bunes can take him down. Yes, he can take him down, I think, but I also believe that Cháirez's takedown defense is very much skewed from a few fights. So one fight, he fought Tatsuro Taira. In a fight that he had Tatsuro Taira in a tight submission attempt, you know, we go back to his submission skills, but he got taken down by Tatsuro Taira. I'm not going to take anything away from him for that fight, right? He got taken down 3 times by Joshua Van, which is kind of skewing the takedown defense a little bit. But all of those takedowns were kind of random. You know, one of those takedowns was when Edgar Cháirez actually jumped guillotine. As I said, he jumps guillotine a lot. He didn't get the guillotine, but that was the reason it was scored a takedown. If he didn't jump guillotine, he probably could have defended the takedown. Another takedown was actually off an attack of Cháirez himself, and he kind of slipped and just fell down, pull guard to some degree. And then one takedown in the third round was a legit takedown, but I feel like that's skewing his takedown stats a little bit. The other person who took him down multiple times was Clayton Carpenter. He beat Carpenter's ass to some degree in round 1, but then in round 2 and round 3, Carpenter started to push the wrestling and grappling and was able to take him down. But I just feel like the 33% takedown defense doesn't really tell a full picture of Cháirez, because I could definitely see him reversing with a guillotine here, or just saying, you know what, I'm not going to let him take me down, and then the 33% takedown defense will look like 70%. It will look actually pretty good. You know, I don't think he has great takedown defense, but I think he can definitely stuff a few attempts from Felipe Bunes here if he decides to do that. More times he just jumps to his back because he loves the jiu-jitsu, you know? So, yeah, I mean, that's how I see the fight playing out. I think Bunes is going to need to grapple here. I think he will try to grapple. I don't think he's going to have much success with it. Maybe he has one guillotine or something like that. But I think Cháirez is going to stay safe. And honestly, I think Cháirez is going to finish him. I think Cháirez is going to win inside the distance. I think he's a better striker, a better boxer. He's more tough, more durable, better cardio, and just a better all-round MMA fighter. So I got Cháirez winning this fight inside the distance. Next up, we have Imanol Rodriguez taking on Kevin Borjas. Imanol Rodriguez coming into this fight fresh off his Dana White's Contender Series highlight win with a record of 6 wins and 0 losses. But if you know, he actually did lose against the now ranked UFC flyweight Joseph Morales on the Ultimate Fighter, but that's an exhibition fight, doesn't count towards his record. So his official record, 6 wins, 0 losses. Kevin Borjas, on the other hand, multiple fights in the UFC at this point, 10 wins with 4 losses. They have Imanol Rodriguez as a massive minus 400 favorite with the underdog price tag on Kevin Borjas coming back at plus 300 odds. This is a very intriguing fight, boys. Honestly, Imanol Rodriguez is a legit prospect. A legit prospect, just like another fight we're going to speak about very soon from the same part of the world. But let's speak about Imanol, and actually they train together a little bit, but let's speak about Imanol Rodriguez first of all. He's taking on Kevin Borjas, UFC semi-veteran at this point. Borjas like 5 fights in the UFC, something like that. Imanol Rodriguez looks pretty legit to me, man. Most of you guys won't know who Imanol Rodriguez is because he doesn't have any UFC fights. He has one Dana White's Contender Series fight where he got a knockout in the first round, and he has a couple of the Ultimate Fighter fights, as I mentioned in the introduction. He has actually lost the fight, but it was an exhibition fight, so they don't count it on his record. But let's speak about that loss for a second. That loss was against Joseph Morales, who is damn near in the top 5 of the flyweight division already. Did fight in the flyweight division back in the day, got cut from the UFC, dominated people on the regional scene, got brought back to the UFC, and then dominated Ediris in his first fight, and then finished Machnell's next fight. I mean, that guy's going to be fighting for the title soon. And let me tell you something now. Imanol Rodriguez potentially won that fight against Joseph Morales. That was an extremely close fight. He dominated round 3 with grappling, which is literally Joseph Morales' game. And then round 2 was a 50-50 round. It was a toss-up. You could have scored it either which way. Morales did get some takedowns, landed a couple of shots. Imanol landed a better shots on the feet, but overall, I understand leaning to Joseph, but you could easily lean to Imanol as well. I cannot tell you how impressive that split decision loss is. In fact, that loss is better than every win in his career. You know, his best performance of his career is his only loss of his career because it was against the best fighter and it was a split decision which could have gone either way. Just a fantastic high-level fight. I'm not going to say it was a fantastic fight. It wasn't that intriguing or amazing to watch or entertaining. Round 2 was pretty good, but outside of that, it wasn't that entertaining. But just skill-wise, it was a fantastic fight to watch, and it really showed me that Imanol Rodriguez is for real. So this guy likes to walk forward into range and land heavy shots. This guy has bad intentions when he throws, man. He's trying to break your ribs with every body shot he throws, and he's hurt multiple people to the body. Multiple people on the regional scene to the body. Even in the Ultimate Fighter, he actually started his knockout over, I can't remember that guy's name, but it's like Ashwan or something like that. He KO'd him in round 1, right? But that started off with a body kick. He hurt him with a body kick first. He was trying to throw his body shots with the hands, which he usually lands, but he wasn't able to do it. So then he switched up and he threw the kicks. And he has just as much power in his kicks as he does in his hands. I mean, some people are better boxers. We think Joshua Van, he's a way better boxer, way more power in his hands than he does in his kicks, even though, biologically, you should have more power in your kicks. Some people are just much better at landing with their hands. Imanol Rodriguez is better at landing with his hands, but if he can't do it, we can see him go to plan B, which is to kick the hell out of his opponents. And he did that on the Ultimate Fighter, ended up getting a first-round knockout because of it. So I think this guy is pretty fucking good, man. Wrestling-wise, he's actually good himself. He's very aggressive, great cardio. I mean, flyweight division, these guys always have good cardio. And in that Joseph Morales fight, the thing that impressed me the most was not winning part of the rounds on the feet in round 2. It was the 3rd round where he was able to take Joseph Morales down. He controlled him with a body lock for the entire round, but more specifically round 1. And I'll tell you why, because Joseph Morales starts hot. He's very, very good in round 1. And if he can get his grappling going, he can just snowball and completely wash you out of there. And Imanol Rodriguez was taken down in a bad position in round 1. Morales took his back, trying to fish him for rear naked chokes. And guess what happened? Rodriguez reversed him. To reverse Joseph Morales on your back in round 1, extremely impressive in my opinion. Probably the most impressive thing. It's funny because I'm saying the most impressive fight of his career was the only fight he ever lost. And in that loss, the most impressive round was the only round that he clearly lost, which was round 1, just because of the reversal that he was able to hit on Joseph Morales. Just with the calmness and the way he stayed safe. I mean, the guy's very physical. He's an athletic freak to some degree. Reminds me a little bit of Davison Figueiredo. He just seems very hard to control. Not as scrambly and as fast twitched. I'm not going to go that far. But just the fact that, if you got a body triangle on Davison Figueiredo, like that guy's probably going to spin out of it. You know what I mean? He's just so athletic and fast and strong and muscly, and that's what Imanol Rodriguez is, man. He's extremely hard to control. Something to note on Imanol Rodriguez as well, which is also why I'm high on him, is he trains under Daniel Cormier. So Daniel Cormier is like a uncle, like a mentor to this guy. He did coach him on The Ultimate Fighter, and he still trains with him post The Ultimate Fighter. And you can see Daniel Cormier very, very happy when he's winning his fights, and you can see that he definitely thinks he can go far in the division. So training under Daniel Cormier, it's going to be a very good thing for his career. Cormier, one of the best fighters in UFC history. Yeah, I just think he's a very good prospect, but he's only 6-0. He's very raw. He gets hit a lot. In his fight on the Dana White Contender Series, he actually got dropped before he dropped his opponent. Now, I don't think it was a bad drop or anything. I honestly think it was more of like a slip. He was off balance. He was throwing a kick, if I remember correctly. But he's reckless. He's there to get hit. In his Ultimate Fighter fight, the one before Morales, he was getting cracked in that fight as well. Because he's just reckless, man. He walks forward. He kind of reminds me of Pantoja on the feet, like where he walks forward, he throws those body punches, but like 4 or 5 body punches in a row, his hands are down here as he's throwing him, and he's just looking at his opponent like he can be countered, if his opponent's just taking the body shots, he can be countered there. So Imanol Rodriguez is definitely open to be countered, and he's fighting someone who's a very good counter striker. Kevin Borjas can counter you, and he's very good at picking his shots. And I honestly feel like Borjas might look very good early in this fight, like he does against almost everybody. We go back to the Joshua Van fight. He looked very good against Joshua Van in round 1. But what happened? The fatigue started to take a toll. He looked decent against Costa in round 1, but then, to be honest, that was the leg kicks that really stopped him. But it's the pressure, it's the aggressiveness of Costa, it's the constant leg kicks, it's not going anywhere, it's the body shots. These things start to take its toll on Kevin Borjas. I think Kevin Borjas is a tough guy. He never quits, and I don't think he will quit in any fight, but he definitely starts to succumb to the pace and pressure when it's not a pretty fight. If you stand on the outside and try to box with Kevin Borjas, you're going to get your face boxed off. Even someone like Joshua Van, an elite boxer for the division, was getting his head boxed off a little bit. That's how good Borjas is at range with his long rangey boxing. But if you can force the pace and pressure, that's when you can really start to have success. And that's exactly what Imanol Rodriguez does well. I wouldn't be surprised if Borjas actually drops Rodriguez, but I think that, as the fight goes on, and honestly, even in round 1, after a couple of minutes, I think Rodriguez starts to just break him with durability, man. Break him with pressure, break him with pace, break him with getting in front of his face, and just hurts him to the body. And I honestly feel like he gets a KO in this one. Honestly feel like he gets a KO. Maybe he wins via decision, like the Joshua Van fight, just based on knockdowns, based on optics, based on hurting Borjas. Not even knockdowns, but just like, hurting Borjas. That is a possibility. I will predict a KO though, because I just feel like Imanol is such an aggressive fighter that it probably will come. But don't be surprised for Borjas to be outskilling Imanol early. Don't be surprised for Borjas to land a knockdown of his own here. Don't be surprised for Borjas to look like big value until he isn't, and that's just what I'm scared about. So, I'm going to pick Imanol Rodriguez here. I'm going to pick him via KO. In the next fight, we have one of my favorite prospects in the entire UFC with Santiago Luna, the 7-0 Mexican prospect, taking on the 7-3 Angel Pacheco, who looks to get his first win in the UFC. Now, boys, I said Imanol Rodriguez is a very, very good prospect, one to watch out for, and that he reminds me of somebody else on the card in terms of they can go far into the division and they're good fighters and they come from the same part of the world. That is Santiago Luna. I have been high on this guy ever since I watched tape on him before his UFC debut in his last fight against Quang Lee. And boy, oh boy, I had a big bet on Santiago Luna in that fight. I also had bet on the under 2.5 rounds, so we had cashed both with an easy first round knockout. I actually, in my breakdown, I said that the most likely outcome was a back and forth fight where Luna impresses, but he's extremely capable of getting a brutal first round finish and making it look easy here. And that's exactly what he did. Santiago Luna is very aggressive, lots of power, very athletic, with an elite wrestling game to back him up. Now, he's very raw and he gets hit and hurt way more often than I would like, but I do think he's going to get better at that. He's still so young, so we know he's improving every single fight. He's one of the only guys who I can clearly say that every single fight I watch from him, I see clear improvements. Like, it's night and day. You know, this fighter 3 years ago is not the same fighter as we see today. And why should he be? He's 21 years old. 3 years ago, he was an 18-year-old child. You know, now he's 21 years old. He's still got 5, 6, 7 years until his prime. I mean, imagine Santiago Luna in 5 years. I mean, the guy's going to be a force to be reckoned with if he keeps improving at the pace that I've seen him. One thing that I really, really like, and this is why I'm calling him such a prospect, is when fighters improved clearly from fight to fight. Because some fighters don't, man. Some fighters come in at 21 and they look semi-similar at 25. You know, I don't think Luna's going to look anything like he does now in 4 years. I truly believe that. Because he doesn't look like anything he does now compared to 4 years ago. You know, or 3 years ago when his earliest tape study is. So, yeah, I think that we're going to see a real prospect in the division. And he's taking on Angel Pacheco here. And if you don't know who Angel Pacheco is Jose Medina, but just a bit more skillful, and he weighs a lot less. And let me explain what I mean. And it's funny because Medina's actually on this card. So, yeah, he's like his younger brother or something. I don't even know the age, actually. I need to check it. But what I mean by that, and there's no disrespect here, I said he's more skillful than Jose Medina, in my opinion, he is, right? But what I mean by that is Pacheco got signed, right, off a loss in Dana White's Contender Series, just like Medina. He got signed off a loss because of how tough he was. He got signed off a loss because of how he's smiling in the octagon after getting pummeled, which is exactly what happened to Jose Medina. You know, so I think they're the same on that level. And honestly, on another level, they're the same because they take so much punishment, man. I don't understand how Angel Pacheco doesn't have a KO loss on his record after the fights that he has had in the UFC. I mean, or under the UFC banner. You know, his fight against Danny Silva, in the first minute, he gets dropped brutally. It looks like it's a round 1 KO over Danny Silva. Somehow he survives the 15-minute distance. One of the best fights in Dana White's Contender Series history. They both land over 200 strikes, significant strikes. That's why Dana White signs them both. But he almost got knocked out in round 1, and he could have got knocked out in any round of that fight. Then you fast forward to the Cowden-Loughran fight. Loughran almost finished him about 3 times. You know, in round 1 again, he gets hurt badly. It looks like he might get knocked out. You know, and that's by Loughran on the feet, which is not good. Danny Silva, getting hurt by Danny Silva on the feet is one thing, but Loughran battering you on the feet in round 1, it's like, it's not a good look, man. And I'll tell you what now, Santiago Luna is going to hurt you on the feet if those guys have. I'll tell you that now. Santiago Luna is potentially more athletic and more aggressive than both Danny Silva and Loughran. I know he's younger. I know he's way less experienced, but I got Santiago Luna all day here, man. I mean, Angel Pacheco takes way too many shots, and Luna has that grappling in his back pocket if he wants it. You know, he can go to the wrestling whenever he wants. He's got a very elite wrestling game for how young he is for MMA. During my research for this fight, I have found out that Santiago Luna is training with one of my other favorite prospects from Mexico and in the UFC in general, Imanol Rodriguez, as I mentioned. And he's also got rounds in with Arman Sarukian and Chito Vera during preparation for this fight. Chito's obviously on this card. Sarukian, one of the greatest fighters in modern day MMA. So the guy's getting legit rounds in at such a young age. I'm very excited to see how far he goes in the division. It is a little bit short notice for Santiago. He only found out about the fight about 5 weeks ago. So by fight time, it's only going to be about a 6-week preparation, 6-week camp for this opponent, which isn't ideal, but I mean, I have full faith that Santiago Luna is going to come in here ready, in shape. I believe this guy trains every day, even without an opponent. And I don't think Pacheco poses the problems needed to have like a full 12-week camp for. He's very tough, Pacheco, but skill-wise, I don't think he presents any issue, honestly, for Santiago Luna. Outside of Luna is kind of lunatic in the octagon, and he can be cracked. And Pacheco isn't a bitch, you know, like he's going to throw. So that could pose some issues. But outside of that, I got Santiago Luna all day here, man. I think he goes on to win this fight. I think he probably calls out Colby Thickness after the fight. He had already mentioned him on social media, thinks he can finish him. So that would be an interesting fight. I would like to see it personally. But yeah, I got Santiago Luna all day here. One of my favorite prospects in MMA to this day. Next up, we have Jose Medina. Still trying to get his first win in the UFC, taking on Ryan Gandra. So Medina coming into this fight, 11 wins, 6 losses. 4 of those losses are under the UFC banner, one being Dana White's Contender Series matchup. Ryan Gandra has a record of 8 wins with only 1 loss. Currently, Ryan Gandra is the massive -550 favorite, with the underdog price tag on Jose Medina sitting at +400 odds. Now we have the real Jose Medina on a card. If you remember earlier, I said Angel Pacheco is kind of like Jose Medina. And Jose Medina is coming into this fight on a 4-fight losing streak. It first started off on Dana White's Contender Series, where he clearly lost. He got beat up pretty badly, but he lasted the decision and posed to the crowd a couple of times and smiled while he was getting beat up. And Dana White signed him because of it. If you guys don't remember that fight, go back and watch it. It's quite a surprise. He signed Jose Medina off a clear loss like that. And then he went on to lose his next 3 fights in the UFC. And somehow he's got another fight. If he loses now, it's going to be 5 fights in a row that he has lost under the UFC banner and potentially not even cut. So it's kind of crazy how, this guy's been in the UFC for so long or so many fights at this point. We see really good fighters come to the UFC and get cut after 2 losses. Jose Medina got signed off a loss, lost 3 fights, and has a 4th one. I just can't wrap my head around it, to be honest, boys, but it is what it is. We're still here, breaking down the fight. On the other hand, we have a real fighter, or a fighter who should have been signed from the Contender Series, unlike Medina, and that is Ryan Gandra. This guy is a Brazilian beast. He goes in there, throws heavy leather. He got a brutal knockout in his fight on the Dana White's Contender Series. It was a massacre. He was a big favorite. It wasn't anything special, to be honest. He basically had nothing coming back at him apart from a couple of leg kicks. He threw heavy shots. Ended up getting a knockout in the first round. It told me nothing about Ryan Gandra. To find out who Ryan Gandra really is, I had to go back on the regional scene. And just a couple of years ago, boys, this guy got iced. He got brutalized. He got knocked out in round 1. And, that showed me a lot more than I could see from his Dana White's Contender Series fight. And I've also seen a lot more of his game. I've seen fights where he's extremely patient, and you wouldn't know that. Looking at his Dana White's Contender Series fight, you think this guy's an absolute lunatic. Now, by the way, I have seen fights where he's just gone in and brawled as well on the regional scene, and he does like to go in and throw heavy leather and brawl. But I've seen fights where he's took it patient on the regional scene, like that Gambolino fight. I've also seen him get takedowns and submissions on the regional scene. I've also seen him get taken down and put in rear naked chokes and submissions himself on the regional scene. So I've actually seen a wide arsenal of this guy's game. I don't think he's that good, like when you're talking about the upper echelon of the division, because I think if you have a bit of slickness to you, you'll be able to counter him. And as I said, he has been knocked out, so I feel like he's going to get knocked out at the UFC level at some point. The issue is here, he's fighting Jose Medina. Medina doesn't offer anything in this fight, boys. I mean, Medina's best attribute is durability. And if your best attribute is durability and your next best attribute is like cardio, but then your next best attribute, maybe striking or something, but it's so many levels below your durability and cardio, you might never win a UFC fight. You might just keep losing via decision. Obviously, he did get knocked out by Atiba Gauthier, but I don't think that Gandra is on the level of striker as Gauthier at all, to be honest. Like, they're worlds apart, and if they fought, I think Gauthier would knock him out in round 1 very easily, actually. What Ryan Gandra does have, though, is a willingness to brawl inside the pocket while still, at times, maintaining decent defense. Like most people, when they go into brawl mode, they're completely wide open for counters. It's basically flip a coin as to if they're going to get knocked out or if they're going to get a knockout. Ryan Gandra is so used to brawling that he's actually less open than a lot of fighters, so I think he can force a brawl and stay a lot safer than his opponent, which he's going to use to his advantage. At some point, someone's going to catch him in that brawl or just catch him on the feet in general. But I do think that he may use that to his advantage here because I don't think Medina really has the power to knock him out. Maybe to catch him with something, but not really to knock him out. I mean, the power difference here is absolutely insane. Like Ryan Gandra has real power for the division. Say what you want about him. He has elite power. He really does. Like I've seen him on top of people like mount position and one shot and they don't want any more. So this guy has real power in his fists. Jose Medina is very durable, though. I don't know whether he's going to get finished by Ryan Gandra here. I expect maybe at some point the finish to come. Maybe from like a ground and pound or something. Because as we know, Jose Medina has a very bad grappling game. We saw in his last fight, Dusko Todorovic submitted him in round 1. We bet on that fight to go under. That was an easy bet. We knew Dusko would take him down and submit him. That was the call. That was the official pick. That's exactly what happened. That was also the official bet for the Elite Zone members. So, if Ryan Gandra goes for takedowns, to which I have seen him do, and goes for ground and pound or submissions, to which I have seen him do, I don't think he's great at it, but he definitely is better than Jose Medina. He could finish this fight early here. If he stays on the feet, I feel like Medina could potentially stay safe. Not stay safe, but not get knocked out early, because Medina's very tough. I'll say that now. Like, that's why he got signed. He got signed from toughness. So I don't want to just go outright and say, yeah, this guy's a berserker brawler, so he's definitely going to get a knockout. I can't say that. I definitely think he's going to win the fight, though. He's a massive favorite. He deserves to be. He can ride out top time. He can get a submission. He can get a ground and pound. And he's a better striker on the feet. So, I mean, I'm picking Ryan Gandra all day here. In terms of the method of victory, it's a tough one. If they give me a submission prop at massive number, I might have to go for it, just knowing how easy it is to submit Medina and actually seeing Gandra get submissions on the regional scene and proactively grapple, although not often. I have seen it. So yeah, I feel like if that prop is good, I'll bet it, but that's not my pick, you know? As I always say, boys, for the guys who somehow can't grasp this sports betting basic concept, picks are not bets. You know, the outcome you believe will happen is not the outcome that you bet, unless there's value on the outcome that you believe will happen on the betting odds. You understand? So what I mean by that is I'm not predicting Ryan Gandra to go out there and get a submission. I'm not going to do that. I don't think that's the most likely outcome of the fight. And obviously a prediction means the most likely outcome of a fight, even though predictions means absolutely nothing to me as a sports bettor, not as a predictor, right? Yeah, I'm not predicting him to go out there and get a submission. But if they give me good odds for a submission, I'm going to take the shot because it's definitely possible. And on a random day, he might just take him down and submit him within round one, you know, and he could even get it late. So if the submission price is live, I'm definitely going to play that here, but I am not predicting a submission. I'll predict a Ryan Gandra KO, I guess, just because he can get it from ground and pound, maybe in round 2, maybe a cut stoppage, something like that, you know. But yeah, my prediction is Ryan Gandra to win this fight. Next up, the first women's MMA fight on the card that I'm going to be breaking down, and it is a pretty decent one with 2 ranked prospects in Macy Chiasson taking on Ailín Pérez. Macy Chiasson coming into this fight, 10 wins, 5 losses. Ailín Pérez, on the other hand, 12 wins, only 2 losses. One of those being a disqualification where she should have won, and the other one being a UFC debut. Ailín Pérez sitting as the minus 175 favorite in this fight, with Macy Chiasson having a plus 150 underdog price tag. This is a fairly closely lined fight, and you know, I semi understand why. In women's MMA, we often do see fights that play out quite close. We often see fights where 2 fighters are high level, ranked, you know, in the top 15 of the weight class like these 2 girls are. They often put on close performances. You know, most of the time, one fighter is not completely dominating the fight, and on another day, another fighter could win. That's just a fact of the matter when it comes to semi-high ranked women's MMA. I don't see this fight being any different. I think both girls can definitely put on a decent performance on their day. The issue I have in this fight is mainly with Macy Chiasson. You know, I really believe that she is a confidence-based fighter. So what that means is if the fight is not going her way, she seems to wilt a little bit and she often seems to lose. She's coming into this fight off a 2-fight skid, and I do think her confidence was kind of broken in those fights. And now she's lost 2 fights in a row. Is she going to be confident coming into this fight? You know, well, that's yet to be seen. I know in the octagon, she's a confidence-based fighter, you know, when the fight actually takes place. But is she a confidence-based fighter based on her record? You know, she can't be that confident coming into this fight. So, you know, these are all things you have to worry about with Macy Chiasson. I wouldn't say the same for every single fighter. Some fighters can be the nail for 10 minutes and then get a knockout in round 3. Phil Rowe comes to mind. But, you know, there are fighters who kind of need to get their game snowballing if they're going to win the fight. And Macy is one of those girls. Another issue is she's going up against someone like Ailín Pérez, who's very good in that round 1. You know, she's very aggressive. She's very strong, definitely early when she has all of her gas tank behind her. And she could definitely muscle Macy Chiasson down here. And if she does, as I said, the game may start snowballing. You know, if she's able to land some elbows from top position, she does have good ground and pound, decent submission game too, heavy arm triangle, heavy top control. It's very hard to get Ailín Pérez off you when she's on top of you. And Macy Chiasson may just lose the first round and kind of be discouraged here. If the fight stays on the feet, I think Chiasson can definitely land her long-range boxing. She seems to be a better striker overall on the feet. But Ailín Pérez does have some tricks up her sleeve. We see that spinning back attack that actually dropped Jocelyn Edwards and won her that fight against Jocelyn Edwards, who has been improving lately. And I will say that this show is recorded before Jocelyn Edwards fights Nora Cornell. So I don't know how that went. I kind of feel like Jocelyn will win, but we'll see. But ultimately, if it does stay on the feet for 15 minutes, I guess Macy Chiasson will probably, you know, get the better of it. One thing I will say, though, is that Macy Chiasson pushes wrestling a lot, just like Ailín Pérez. The issue with Macy Chiasson is that she gets reversed a lot. Her wrestling doesn't work as well as Ailín Pérez's wrestling. And if she tries to take Ailín Pérez down, especially early, I could most certainly see her getting reversed and not being able to get up. Just like what happened in the Ketlen Vera fight. If you go back and watch that fight for film study, preparing for this fight, you will see that Macy Chiasson makes some really bad decisions in the octagon, shooting for takedowns when she shouldn't be shooting, and just getting reversed. You know, Ketlen Vera wasn't even credited with 1 takedown on the official stats for that fight, but she was credited with more than 10 minutes of control time. That tells you what you need to know about the wrestling, reversal, anti-wrestling game of Macy Chiasson. If she isn't stronger than her opponent and can't muscle them down, which I don't think she's going to be able to do early, maybe in the clinch, but not on the ground, then she can get reversed. She can fall victim to the heavier, stronger grappler. And I feel like Ailín Pérez fits the bill here. So I don't think it's a home run for Ailín Pérez. I keep saying Ailín. But I do think that she has some advantages that will get her the win in this fight. I want to put a little disclaimer out here, as I always do, because I try to give you guys as much information as possible. I am actually friendly with Ailín Pérez and her team. I have a lot of respect for them. We actually spent some time out in Las Vegas gambling together, me and Ailín on the same tables. We was walking around the Bellagio gambling on different tables, different games. So I'm rooting for her. I want to see her win. I don't want to see her lose. So maybe take this breakdown with a pinch of salt. I tried to be fully unbiased, and I think I have done by telling you that Macy Chiasson potentially will get the better of the striking if it stays on for 15 minutes and things like that. I'm not, outright saying that Ailín's just going to beat everyone with ease. I'm trying to maintain professionalism and just basically speaking my truth. But I'd be lying if I says I wasn't a loyal person and I'm not rooting for her. You know what I mean? Like I am. So yeah, I'm just saying that as a disclaimer. Maybe you want to listen to somebody else's pick for that one. But my pick will be Ailín Pérez to win this fight. Most likely via decision. Macy Chiasson, even though she does get discouraged, she's still a very tough girl and a hard girl to finish. Ailín Pérez is pretty aggressive with her finishing instincts. She does go for them, but I will predict her to win a decision here. Next up, we have Cristian Quiñonez taking on Kris Moutinho. Cristian Quiñonez coming into this fight with a big MMA record of 18 wins, 5 losses. Kris Moutinho, on the other hand, 14 wins with 7 losses. So half the amount of losses than wins on Kris Moutinho's record. Quiñonez, one of the biggest favorites on the card at minus 650 odds, with the underdog price tag on Kris Moutinho sitting at plus 475. I love Kris Moutinho, man. I love Kris. How can you not? Kris Moutinho, the guy who eats a million punches and sometimes comes back, but usually doesn't. I actually max bet Sean O'Malley inside the distance against him. And honestly, I got saved there. That should have went to a decision. I mean, it should have been stopped multiple times, but then when it wasn't stopped, it should have gone to a decision because the stoppage, it was early, but you could also argue super late. So it was a bit weird, but I definitely got saved by Herb Dean there. And then he fights someone like Guido Canetti in his next fight and gets iced early in round 1. It's a crazy game, MMA. Sean O'Malley basically took the guy to a decision and Guido Canetti knocked him out in round 1. It's a mad game, MMA. It's a crazy game that we bet on, but we absolutely love it. Kris Moutinho was always, tough and durable, but he always got hurt a lot. The thing about it, man, is that in his last fight, he got absolutely brutalized. He got knocked out unconscious. It was a bad knockout by Malcolm Wellmaker. I actually bet on that massive Malcolm Wellmaker KO in round 1. It was plus money. It's kind of crazy looking back at it. That was always going to be a high likelihood of an outcome. I actually gave that bet out for free on my social media and, we all cashed that one. It was when I was doing my Vegas glitches, if you remember, and I said there was a Vegas glitch, which was Malcolm Wellmaker KO round 1 being plus money. So, I've bet against Kris a lot and I've won 2 times, pretty big. 1 time was a max bet. I won both bets. So I like him because of that. I think he's going to lose again. I think he's going to lose again. As I said, Quiñonez, biggest underdog, biggest favorite on the card. There's kind of a reason for that. Quiñonez is tough to trust, but I mean, skill-wise, he's so much better than Moutinho, man. He's the way better boxer, way better striker, hits harder. I mean, he basically does everything better than Kris Moutinho outside of maybe cardio, but I can't even say as a guarantee that, Moutinho has better cardio. I know he's tough and durable, but I don't know, man. He kind of just walks forward like a zombie. I don't want to say his cardio is so good. I mean, Quiñonez has pretty good cardio, did get finished by Barcelos, but that was an extremely high-paced fight. And his cardio held up semi-well there until he got finished, and that was more of the grappling. And, he was winning against Barcelos. He hurt him badly, and he could have won the fight. I mean, that would have been a high-level win. The issue with Quiñonez is just he doesn't fight often, In his last 5 years, he's fought 4 times or something, which is not great. Moutinho, at least out there on the regional scene, grinding, fighting often, and then getting a knockout. He took some time off after that knockout, but coming back in straight away, he's way more active. But I think Quiñonez should beat his ass, man. He's way higher level overall. He's going to land big shots on Moutinho. And if Moutinho's chin is even 20% worse than it was based on that last KO, where he finally got knocked out unconscious, then he's probably just going to get knocked out again in round 1, man. Just like he did against Guido Canetti, who isn't on the same level as Quiñonez, in my opinion. So yeah, I got Quiñonez here. I got Quiñonez via KO. Quiñonez KO in round 1 even. Now, talk about MMA veterans. We have another one on the card. Douglas da Silva de Andrade taking on Javier Reyes. De Andrade, the veteran record of 29 wins, 6 losses. Javier Reyes, pretty extensive record himself, 22 wins and only 5 losses. They have Javier Reyes sitting as the minus 230 favorite, with the underdog price tag on De Andrade coming back at plus 195 odds. Yeah, this is a weird one, boys. I just don't know where Douglas da Silva de Andrade is at 40 years old, having so many fights as he has in the UFC. He wins one, he loses one, he wins one, he loses one. He loses fights that he's supposed to win, like the Cody Stamann fight, and he wins fights that he's supposed to lose, like the Sergey Morozov fight. And he's had a layoff now. I haven't seen him for ages. And now he's taking on this new, I want to say up-and-comer, but in the UFC he's an up-and-comer. But this guy's a regional veteran. You know, he's been all around the place on the regionals. He's paid his dues. He's fought fighters who are pretty good, pretty high-level fighters. He's lost some, he's won some. Like, this guy isn't just going to be scared by the moment of the UFC. I'm extremely certain of that. And that is Javier Reyes. You know, Reyes is not like super skilled anywhere, but he's very, very aggressive. He's got great cardio. He doesn't stop pushing forward. He's got decent striking, decent defense, pushes a crazy pace. He's basically good everywhere. De Andrade has fought the much better level of competition. You know, there's no argument there. Reyes has fought absolute bums when you compare them to the record of Douglas da Silva de Andrade. This could be his last fight. I want to give him some props. You know, I want to give him a shout out because, man, look at this guy's record, boys. Just have a look at the screen right now. Tapology. Have a look at who he's fighting. He's fighting Rob Font, Marlon Chito Vera, Peter Yan, Henan Barao, Lerone Murphy. He fought those 5 fighters in a row. What a crazy 5-fight run. And then even more recently, he's fighting Saeed Nurmagomedov, Cody Stamann, Miles Johns. I mean, this guy has fought some elite competition in his day, and he's 40 years old. He's still out, still doing his thing, hasn't fought in 2 years. And now he's getting back in the octagon against this guy who's, you know, fresh into the UFC. Is it going to be too much for Reyes? I don't think the moment will be too much, but will the jump up in skill level against someone who has so much experience be too much? Maybe. Ultimately, I do think Reyes is going to win this fight. The reason I think he's going to win this fight, honestly, a big part of it is gas tank. His gas tank, pushing the pace. I mean, if you want to beat Da Silva de Andrade, you have to push a crazy pace on him and not get knocked out, basically. And that's exactly what Reyes does. He pushes a crazy pace on you and basically doesn't get knocked out. That is literally his game. Now, I do think there's a skill gap here. I think Da Silva de Andrade is probably a little bit more skillful than him, a bit faster, more explosive, hits harder, way better experience. He's a vet. You know what I mean? Like there are definitely advantages for the 40-year-old man here, but I think that he's going to get tired if he doesn't finish or hurt and debilitate Reyes badly. And so I think around the 7-minute mark, you're going to see Douglas da Silva de Andrade get extremely tired, and Reyes is going to push forward and keep that pace and never get tired and weaponize his cardio as he always does. And then I think he's going to start to pour it on da Silva de Andrade towards the later portions of the fight. And I think that's where you're going to see the tide turning. And I think the fight may look completely different in round 1 than it does by the end of round 2, and then ultimately in round 3. And I'm actually saying that it could be another round 3 finish that I called earlier with Ernesta Karekkaite's fight. And I think it could be another round 3 finish here with Javier Reyes getting the round 3 finish over Douglas da Silva de Andrade. So that is my official prediction, but I don't know whether I'll play a money line. As I said, picks are not bets. My pick is Reyes. Am I going to bet Reyes? That's a whole different conversation, boys, and I'm going to take some real time to think about that one. There may be some other better ways we can play him, or play the fight in general, or we pass on it. The good thing about being sports bettors and not sports books is we don't have to bet every fight. They are betting every fight as they are putting lines out for every fight. Now, that's a nuanced conversation. You could say they're not betting because they're basically taking a rake with their juice. But listen, we don't have to bet every fight. That's what I'm trying to say, right? So I don't know if I'm going to bet this one, but my prediction will be Reyes to get the fight won inside the distance in round 3. Another women's MMA fight here, and we have Ernesta Kareckaite taking on Sofia Montenegro, fresh off the Dana White's Contender Series. This is going to be a very exciting fight, in my opinion, boys. Kareckaite has a record of 6 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw. Sofia Montenegro, on the other hand, 6 wins with 2 losses. Currently, they have Kareckaite, a massive favorite here, minus 300 odds, with the underdog price tag on Sofia Montenegro sitting at plus 250.
So this is a fight between Ernesta Kareckaite, the split decision queen, versus a girl who got signed off a loss on Dana White's Contender Series. So it seems to be the theme of UFC Mexico, where the entire card is fighters who are signed off a loss from Contender Series. Angel Pacheco, José Medina, and now Sofia Montenegro. So let's talk about Sofia Montenegro before we get to Ernesta Kareckaite. So Sofia Montenegro, she was signed off a loss. She arguably won the fight, though. It was a split decision, and it was a fantastic fight. You know, multiple times in that fight, you thought that Sofia Montenegro might get a finish. In round 1, she was really putting it on her, but most certainly, Cháirez did come back into that round. By the end of it, round 2, she drops her opponent, Cháirez, with a brutal 3-punch straight combination. I mean, it's not a combination. It was 3 separate punches, but they all landed, and the third one ended up dropping her in a sequence of about 15 seconds, with a few other punches landed in there as well. And then she wasn't able to get the stoppage. Then she lost round 3, and so she lost via split decision. I personally thought she probably won round 1 and round 2, although round 1 definitely became close towards the end. She was just doing a lot more damage early. So I think that she deserved to win that fight. So I understand why Dana White signed her, you know, because both of these fighters are entertaining. You know, Sofia Montenegro is a very entertaining fighter. Say what you want about her, say what you want about her skill set. She is an entertaining fighter. She is going to walk forward, real power in her hands, and she's going to throw heavy leather. She doesn't have good defense. I don't even think she has a good chin. You know, if we go back to round 2, the round that she clearly won, you know, Dana White's Contender Series matchup, she got wobbled very badly towards the end of round 2. And if that round had 20 more seconds on it, who knows what would have happened? She may have been knocked unconscious, because I had seen it before on the regional scene. It was almost the same sequence. She got hit by a counter. This wasn't a counter in Dana White's Contender Series, but she got hit by a counter. She got dropped badly, but then she recovered, and then she got hit again and brutally knocked out. That's what happened to Sofia Montenegro in her lone loss before Dana White's Contender Series on the regional scene. It was a 10-second knockout. At women's MMA, that's red flags. And as I said, in the second round of the Dana White's Contender Series fight, she got hurt, you know, so I don't think her chin is that good. Her defense isn't good because she just walks forward into range and she believes in her power. One of these days is going to get her knocked out again. I'm very confident that she gets knocked out in the UFC by somebody. I don't know if it's going to be Ernesta this weekend, but it may very well be. Now, let's speak about Ernesta. I did call her the split decision queen because look at Ernesta's record here. Look how many split decisions she has. She only has 6 wins.
And out of those 6 wins, 4 of them are split decisions. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a split decision rate like that in women's or men's MMA history. You know, so we'll see if it continues. I'll tell you something now. This could be a split decision. This could be another split decision win for Kareckaite. Now, I think Kareckaite is the much better striker overall. But the issue with Kareckaite is what you've seen on her record. You know, she does give moments away. She gives minutes away. And she does go to close decisions a lot. Whether you say some of those fights she should have lost, whether you say some of those fights she should have won, she still has a propensity for going to split decision because the judges, for some reason, see something on the other side. You know, the judges see something in her opponents in almost every fight. Even in that Diana Barbosa fight, which is her lone loss of her career. Maybe she should have lost against Carly as well. It was close. But in that Diana Barbosa fight, you know, that was a very close fight as well. That could have went to split decision as well. I mean, she dominated round 3. It was easy round 3 win for Kareckaite. She lost round 1 easy. Round 2 was close. You know, I felt like she lost it, but the end of that round, I mean, you could easily score that fight to Kareckaite via split decision. Like, that's a possible scorecard. So you're talking about every single fight she's ever had outside of the 2 knockouts in round 1 in 2019. Basically, they've been split decision type fights, which is crazy. You know, so how can you trust her as a massive favorite when you know that even when she's a much higher level than her opponent, like Nicole Cagliari in her last fight, she could potentially still go to split decision. Now, the other fighters, they're very good fighters. You know, Carly Judice, very good fighter. Deani Barbosa, very good fighter. So those split decisions are not, like, there's nothing to worry about. But she's going to a split decision with an 0-0 fighter making their debut, you know, like on the regional scene. It just tells me something about her game. I think Montenegro is going to do well in round 1 here. I think she may even be able to hurt Kareckaite. If you go back and watch the Deani Barbosa fight that I referenced earlier, Barbosa has good boxing. Montenegro's game is boxing. And Barbosa's very physical like Montenegro and hits hard. And Barbosa wobbled Kareckaite in round 1 pretty badly with a straight hand. I wouldn't be surprised to see Montenegro do the same. But I think as the fight goes on, you have to predict Kareckaite to start pulling away as the better striker with better cardio and more volume and way higher level experience. You know, like, you have to do that. This is like the Cháirez matchup that Montenegro had in her last fight on a Dana White's Contender Series, but way, way harder. You know, it's like an upgraded version of Cháirez. Cháirez threw a lot of volume. She was physically outmatched. She was taller, rangier. I mean, that's exactly what Kareckaite is. Kareckaite is just more tall, more rangy, throws way more volume. You know what I mean? It's just like an upgraded version. And she lost that fight. It was close, but she lost that fight. So I have to predict her to lose this fight. But I can't say I see value at minus 300 odds. You know, I can't, because I feel like she could easily get hurt in round 1. And if you get hurt in women's MMA, you lose the round. Like, it's unlikely Kareckaite is then going to hurt her enough in the same round that she just got hurt in to win the round. So if she could be 1-0 down going into round 2 and round 3, I think she'll win round 2 and round 3, Kareckaite. And she could even get a late finish, honestly. And maybe even a finish in an early finish, just because of that brutal knockout that I saw Sofia Montenegro take in 10 seconds on the regional scene. And then, you know, when she got wobbled in Dana White's Contender Series, I have a real question about her chin. I don't think Kareckaite has that much power, but she throws so much volume that something could definitely go through, you know. But I do think that, like, there's a decent probability that Montenegro looks good round 1 and wins round 1. And I do think she's still going to lose the fight, but you can't play minus 300 if you're saying that there's a big chance that your fighter is going to lose round 1. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to play minus 300 here. I wouldn't mind maybe like Kareckaite round 3, because I think she's going to be pouring it on in round 3. She pours it on in basically every round 3 she's ever been in. I don't think anything's going to change here. She has very good cardio. I believe she was a former swimmer. And so, you know, those girls have, or those people have very good cardio, as we know. Swimmer's lungs, they call it. So, yeah, I got Kareckaite to win this fight. TKO round 3? Decision? Split decision? You know, it's one of those ones. But yeah, I definitely got her to win the fight. Next up, we have Eric Silva taking on Francis Marshall. Marshall with the 8-3 record. Silva a very similar record of 9-3. Francis Marshall looking to bounce back on what was called one of the worst robberies of 2025 in his split decision loss against Myron Santos. And the bookmakers think he's going to do it. They currently have Francis Marshall as a minus 550 favorite, with the underdog price tag on Eric Silva sitting at plus 400 odds. I'm going to be quick on this fight, boys. I got Marshall here. I got Marshall to dominate this fight, to be honest. He's improving, in my opinion, getting better. He had a good performance on the Dana White's Contender Series back in the day. Had some ups and downs in the UFC. A loss to Gomez. Fairly close fight, to be honest. Also a loss to Isaac Dolgarian. That was a bit of a brutalization. But outside of that, he's performed very well in the UFC. Lost against Myron Santos, another loss in his last fight. So he has a negative record in the UFC. He's only got 2 wins and 3 losses. But if you count his Dana White's Contender Series fight, then, you know, it's 3 wins and 3 losses. And one of those losses was pretty close against Gomez. And then, I don't know why it was a split, though. I don't think it should have been a split, but it was close. And then one of those losses, he won. You know, he beat Myron Santos, in my opinion. It was definitely a close fight, but I think he beat Myron Santos. And I think Myron Santos is a legit player in the division. You know, I think he's a very, very good fighter. And I've bet on him in almost every fight in the UFC. I think he's so good. I didn't bet on him in that fight. You know, he was a big favorite. But to go to a split decision with Myron Santos, to hurt Myron Santos on the feet, and then to get some grappling going and just make it ugly and gritty, it tells me he's improving. It tells me he's here to stay. It tells me he's here for the long term. And it tells me he's going to beat Eric Silva. You know, if we speak about Eric Silva, the guy's 38 years old. He's coming back off a bad injury that we saw in the cage in his last fight against Mohamed Naimov, where in round 1, his leg completely went. He had to take a lot of time off for that knee injury that we saw inside the cage. And I just don't think he's going to come back at a high level. You know, his best days are probably behind him. Francis Marshall's best days are definitely in front of him. And we're talking about a 12-year age difference here. We've got a 26-year-old Francis Marshall improving, getting better clearly fight to fight versus someone who's 38 years old, you know, who's lost 2 in the UFC, not had any wins in the UFC. No fight has been close. I mean, both losses have been clear. He got dominated by TJ Brown on the mat. Francis Marshall is a very good wrestler. He can hurt him on the feet. Eric Silva's dangerous on the feet, I will say that, but Marshall's a tough guy, man. He can be hurt, but he's tough. He can be rocked, he can be wobbled, but he's very tough. Francis Marshall just hurt Myron Sanos, who's a very, very good defensive striker. Francis Marshall can definitely catch and hurt Eric Silva on the feet. More than likely, though, the likely outcome, as I always say, boys, likely outcome, picks, not bets, right? The likely outcome, by the way, is not always the one I'm betting, as I told you, but the likely outcome is Francis Marshall just takes him down, rinses and repeat, and dominates him on the ground and finishes him on the ground. So that's going to be my prediction for this fight. I think the ground and pound is extremely live here because Francis will go for it, but he's got so many rear naked chokes on his amateur and professional record that I'm going to go for a submission here. So Francis Marshall via submission in round 1 or round 2 is going to be my official prediction. I think he wins this fight, passes this test with flying colors. Next up, we have 2 Contender Series winners making their UFC debut fighting each other, which we rarely see in the UFC. Wes Schultz, the 8-2 fighter, is taking on Damian Pinhas, who has a similar record of 8 wins with 1 loss. Currently, they have Pinhas as the -210 favorite with the underdog price tag on Wes Schultz sitting at +180 odds. So both of these guys making their debut coming off Contender Series wins. We rarely see it in MMA. You know, usually a Contender Series winner will get a bit of a UFC test, but for some reason the UFC have just put these guys in against each other. So it's an interesting matchup, boys, an interesting matchup. I feel like Wes Schultz does a lot of stuff that Pinhas is not good at, you know, wrestling, grappling, strange submission attempts, pretty flexible submission attempts from all angles, good reversals, etc., makes things weird on the ground, and Pinhas could definitely find himself in a whole world of trouble if the fight gets to the ground. But on the same token, I think Pinhas is very strong, very athletic, and he's probably going to be able to stop a lot of the wrestling attacks from Wes Schultz, at least early. I say at least early because you're most athletic and most strong earlier in the fight, right? But actually, speaking about it out loud, I believe that Wes Schultz has worse cardio, inferior cardio than Pinhas. So most likely, Wes Schultz's best round will be round 1, as it usually is, as we've seen throughout his career. You know, he starts to tire out. Even on his last Dana White's Contender Series fight, the reason he lost it really was because he started to get tired out, you know? I mean, both of those guys were tired, but Wes Schultz didn't really have anything, couldn't get out of the position, got pounded out, got finished. So I could see something like that happening here, honestly, but I think Wes Schultz will have some chance to wrap up a submission, get some grappling going early. But then, like I said, Pinhas is strongest early as well, so it's not going to be easy. I got Pinhas to win the fight. Like I said, I trust him as the fight goes later. We've seen Wes Schultz gas out before. I also think he's the better striker. You know, he's going to hurt Wes Schultz on the feet. Wes Schultz needs to get some grappling going to win the fight. I don't know whether he's going to be able to do it. So I'm going to pick Pinhas for that reason. I'm going to look at some props for this fight, boys. I'm not really that intrigued by any money line, but I'm going to look at some props for this fight. There's a few ways that you could attack this. Ultimately, my prediction will be Pinhas to win this fight. I'll say via knockout. Well, that's it, lads. That's another episode wrapped up. I hope you enjoyed it. I put blood, sweat, and tears into taping these fights. Hopefully it pays off and we can cash yet again. If you want to know more about me and join my inner circle, my private community where I help people make money from betting on MMA, then the link is in the bio for that. Outside of that, like, subscribe, all of that, and I will see you in the next video, and we'll keep on killing these books.